All right, joining me is Phillip Rossman-Reich, the editor of the Orlando Magic Daily and the host of the Locked On Magic podcast. And we're going to be talking about the Orlando Magic basketball season because Orlando has one of the best records in the NBA, and we're here in the middle of December. Phillip, let's just start with that. What has been the recipe for the Magic winning so many games to start off this season?
Yeah, it's hard to say exactly what the recipe is because so much of what this Magic team is doing and what they've been successful at is not what people perceive to be what the NBA is today. Like everyone complains, everyone shoots too many threes. There's no post up game or whatever, and there's no defense, especially. And this Magic team, I think they're still last in the league in 3-point attempts per game. They don't shoot a lot of threes. They don't shoot them well when they do. They live in the paint. They're about defense almost completely. They're number 2 in the league in defensive rating. They're just finding ways to gut out victories. And obviously they have some young players who play with a ton of energy. They've got this huge chip on their shoulder as they're just trying to prove themselves in the league and prove what they're capable of being and what they may one day become. But there's a lot to be excited about with this Magic team, and they've really done a good job building themselves up into this team through the first quarter or so of the season.
That was one of the things that I noticed, just kind of going through like the stats preparing for this podcast, is that this team is very much like a defensive minded team where like they're third in opposing opponents' points per game. And they really don't, like, you think about like Paolo Bencaro and Franz Wagner as the kind of like the anchors of the team. You don't necessarily think of them as being like defensive like stoppers. And then you've had like two key pieces out the most of the year with Markelle Fultz and Wendell Carter only playing 5 games. And I think really the thing that's like shocked me with this team is that it seems like the defense is being led kind of like by the guards of Jalen Suggs, who's had a really good come up here, after maybe not starting off his career the way that we were really projecting out of Gonzaga. And then Anthony Black too, the rookie, who's also been providing a lot of really good perimeter defense for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that because like Jamal Mosley, the Magic's head coach, has joked with us in the past, like Paolo Bencaro and Franz Wagner told on themselves in the World Cup by playing such good defense for their national teams, and they came back and there was just this expectation now that they're going to be part of the team's defense. And look, the Magic have been building this defense up for several years. When Jeff Weltman came in, everyone joked about the Magic's obsession with length. But now they can literally switch almost every position 1 through 5. They have guys who are versatile defenders. They have a really strong defensive scheme. It was built last year where they finished 6th in the league in defensive rating after December 7th, which is when the season began, as Magic fans know. They started the year 5-20 and then went 29-28 the rest of the season. They built on these foundations.
So there's hope for the Pistons.
Yeah, exactly. The Pistons, there's not much, but because the Magic never looked as bad as these Pistons did. But the Magic had a 9-game losing streak last year too. Like when it clicks fast. Like I would there'll be signs that it's about to click, but when it clicks, and that's what we're seeing with Orlando. And so this team has a really, I think, simple defensive philosophy. They want to protect the paint. They want to prevent you from scoring and even getting shots in the paint. And then they're going to use their length to either get deflections on those kickout passes to open shooters or to get out to those open shooters. And, another really underrated part of this team is the Magic have made very few changes to their roster over the last 2 years. You'd think a team that won, I think, 22 games and then a team that won 34 games, that you'd want to see some moves and some changes to the roster. Well, from last year's 34-win team to this year's team, the only 3 guys that are new to the roster are Joe Ingles and the 2 rookies, Anthony Black and Jet Howard. So there's a lot of built-in trust and understanding of like, this is what we want to do defensively. Last season, was sort of a proof of concept season. And now this season, they're just playing with so much more confidence and belief. And obviously success has fed them.
You mentioned kind of the emphasis of like protecting the paint on offense, or excuse me, protecting the paint on defense, and then really kind of exploiting the paint on offense with all the size. That's the thing I've noticed with the Magic is that you're starting like 3 guys every game that are over 6'10". And I think we're seeing it a little bit in the NBA this year where these teams that just have a lot of size are kind of like the teams that are winning early and often, kind of like in Minnesota. I think that's kind of how the Lakers have gotten a lot of success. We obviously know the two best players in the NBA are Jokic and Embiid, and then the Bucks have always, when they've been winning these last years, have just had a tremendous amount of size. Uh, you mentioned something about like the world championships there, and when the United States played, Paolo Bencaro played a lot of the five. Is that kind of going to be his future as a position in the NBA, or is he going to be a guy that is kind of playing that forward position where the Magic have him and Franz at kind of like that 3-4, and then they might have like a Wendell Carter or a Gogo Batazzi. I know I mispronounced that name, but as kind of like a rim protector and just kind of overwhelm teams with size.
Yeah, the easy answer is I think that the idea is that Paolo is primarily a forward. That he'll always have sort of a rim protecting like a traditional center, because do you want Paolo Banchero guarding Joel Embiid or Nikola Jokic? Probably not. Like, he's a big dude, but he isn't that big. So I do think that there are opportunities, and we've seen some opportunities for the Magic to play a bit smaller, to try Banchero at the 5, or to try him alongside Jonathan Isaac and Franz Wagner. We've seen Magic, especially with Wendell Carter out, close games with that alignment so they can just switch everything. So, the simple answer is to say, I think the Magic's preference is to have a traditional center, or have someone who can play traditional center. But obviously, I think the more complex answer is the way this Magic team is built and the way this Magic team is made up is it's about positional versatility. It's about your ability to guard multiple positions, and it's about what I like to call skill versatility. To have players of like Paolo's size who can play some guard, who can do the duties of a guard. With Markelle Fultz out, Paolo's essentially been the team's point guard in a lot of sets and initiating a lot of action for this team. If he's not doing it, Franz Wagner is doing a lot of it too. And so this is more the vision of, I think, what the Magic have been trying to build and are finding success with, is we're going to be able to throw different kinds of alignments at you, put stress on your players who are not used to guarding, a Banchero who can handle the ball. I mean, against a Monday against Cleveland is a great example. Cleveland was just determined to put size on him at all times. They wanted to throw bodies at him, make him work through length, all that stuff that you should be trying to do with him. But that ultimately meant that Tristan Thompson was guarding him, and Banchero needed maybe a little bit of time to figure out how to attack Tristan Thompson. But at a certain point, it started being, okay, Banchero is going to isolate on Thompson, and then we're going to have Goga Batadze or have Franz Wagner flash to the middle of the paint where a rim protector like Thompson would be, and we're going to get an advantage because Banchero is a really skilled passer as well, which you don't expect from a guy who's 6'10", 250. So, I think the short answer is this team will ultimately probably play more traditional than you think, but the long answer is they can really play however they need to play to beat you. Whatever, we'll see in the playoffs how flexible they get, but this is a team that can experiment a little bit and should have some success doing so.
I was looking kind of at Paolo Banchero's stats and just kind of the Orlando Magic stats in general, because if you look a lot of like the really good teams in the NBA, there's always like that really kind of like high points per game scorer. Like on OKC, it's Shea. We know Philly, it's Embiid, Boston, Tatum. The high scorer on this team is Franz and Paolo, and they're kind of like both like smidgen together at that 20 points per game thing. Paolo, as we know, I'm going to stay on him here first. Won the Rookie of the Year last year. If just a person that doesn't watch the Magic that often, or maybe at all, might just look at Paolo's stats compared to this year and last year, and you kind of see the points are around the same, the rebounds are about the same, assists are a little bit up. You, as somebody that's covered this team for a while now, has covered Paolo for like a year and a few months now. How has his game improved last year coming into this year?
It honestly, like, as good as Paolo was last year, and I like repeatedly made this point throughout the summer, as good as Paolo was his rookie year, that is the worst he is going to play in his entire career. Especially if everything goes right, his rookie season is going to be the worst year of his career. And this year, the numbers don't reflect it, but this year really has been night and day. Like, he has been that much better, and the numbers don't reflect it yet. He had a really kind of slow start to the season, scoring wise, but he is much more deliberate and purposeful with his dribbling. He's learning how to read defenses a lot better. Like, if you watch Paolo play, he'll isolate and he'll take he'll have a guy on his back in the post, he'll take a hard dribble and you'll just watch his eyes. Like he's watching how the defense is going to react to him before he decides how to attack it. He's seeing these double and triple teams. He's seeing a lot of different schemes thrown at him to try and get the ball out of his hands. But to me, like the two biggest numbers for him are his shooting is up really across the board, except for his free throw shooting, which is the only disappointing part of his game right now. He'd be averaging 22, 23, 24 points per game if he were making his free throws at the rate he was last year. And his assists are up to like 4.5 per game. Like he is dishing the ball, and he is. I think there was this perception of him coming out of Duke that this is a scorer. This guy is the next Carmelo Anthony, and I think that attached a lot of baggage to him about the kind of person he is. This dude is not selfish at all. Sometimes you want him to be a little bit more selfish at times and to try and look for his own. And I think a big part of the season is him understanding that balance of when do I make sure I get others involved and when do I make sure I get my own. And like last week's game at Cleveland was a great example of that. Orlando was really struggling to shoot. Paolo had it going and they just fed him over and over again. And that's how he got 42 points. And that's really what kept the Magic in the game for a lot longer than they should have been in it. He'll have games like that, and then he'll have games where he's just kind of cruising and getting assists. Like he's almost had a couple triple doubles this year. It's that versatility, and it's just that how much his game is varied and started growing and expanding that I think has really summed up his growth, even if the numbers don't show it to people who are just kind of box score watching.
It definitely helps too. I think just playing in the NBA, just after a while, you notice like, oh, this is how like a defense does if I do this, or this is how a team's trying to defend me, or if I'm in this position. Oh, and it's also too, you learn your players too. Like there's a lot of talent on this Orlando Magic roster, and I thought this team was going to be improved heading into this year. I thought they could maybe be a fringe play-in team, maybe like a 6 seed, depending on how the East all shakes out. But the thing I always thought was a little concerning to me was that this team just had like almost too much talent. And sometimes when you have too much talent, there's kind of like, a lot of like locker room dynamics of like who is playing and like who's getting the shots. And where does that kind of unselfishness, as you talked about, where does that really come from on this team? Is it coming from like the best 2 players? Is it coming from head coach Jamal Mosley? Where is that kind of unselfish culture developing with this team?
I mean, I think it really comes from everyone. Jamal Mosley repeatedly tells all of us that, this team is going to constantly do things by committee, and that, can be both good and bad. Everyone kind of understands that, Paolo is, for lack of a better way to phrase it, kind of in the alpha. Like everyone understands like, oh, this guy is really good, but his makeup is to be selfless. Franz Wagner, he is as unassuming as anyone can be. His makeup is to be selfless. If anything, like the biggest complaint Magic fans have had over the last 2 years is that Franz doesn't shoot enough, that he doesn't look for his own shot enough. And I'd be like, observationally, yeah, I agree with that. But he's also second on the team in field goal attempts behind your top scorer. Cole Anthony's rookie year, and then Paolo Bencaro last year. So it's not like he's not getting shots. It's just the way I think a lot of these guys are made up. That's been a big thing Jeff Weltman has sought after, is guys who are selfless, guys who have that kind of attitude. They need guys who want to invest in the bigger project. And I think that's been a big thing too, is, everybody believes in what they're building. Like even when they won 22 games, Jamal Mosley had that team playing hard toward the end of the season. Like you could see hints of like, okay, there's something to work with here. And then obviously last year, like any team, any young team especially, that starts the year 5-20, like that usually will break you up. I was so it was disappointing to start the season that poorly, but like the big concern that I think a lot of us had here in Orlando was, okay, this is a young team starting that poorly. Is there a point where, Paolo just says, screw it, I'm going to score as many points as I can, or things break apart. They don't commit on defense. You see that so many times. And the fact that Orlando started off that poorly, still believed in everything they were doing and finished the way that they finished. And I like, a lot of people, when I mention this, say like, look, the team finished 29-28 over the last 57 games, almost, 2/3 of the season there. Like that's not insignificant. And people are like, well, 29-28 is nothing to celebrate, but when you start 5-20, when you were a 22-win team the year before, that's like legitimate progress. That's being a 500 team. That's a big deal. And I think the team really understood that progress and just bought fully into it. Whatever stock they were left on the floor at the end of last season, they bought up real quickly. And I think that's what's fed this start to the season.
So do you not have any concerns that maybe when Carter and Fultz come back, that maybe there might be a little kind of like chemistry issues, just kind of like maybe some players going to have to start regressing to like their previous
I
roles?
mean, obviously there will be some changes. Like,
Hmm.
Goga Batadze has played fantastic over the last, 20 or so games. He has been a really big piece and has helped maintain the Magic's defensive intensity with that starting group. He's probably going to be out of the rotation because Mo Wagner's been really good coming off the bench for Orlando. Anthony Black as a rookie has been so good defensively, and so much of what the Magic do in those first 6 minutes of the game is just establish the tone defensively. I don't like that group does okay offensively, but they're all about getting stops on defense. But look, Wendell Carter is probably the best interior defender on the team. Like, people forget that. Markelle Fultz is, for as much as there's still some hammering about his shooting and his aggressiveness of looking for a shot on offense, he is an excellent defender and really plays into what they do into what they do defensively. Sure. Anthony Black has like a minuscule usage rate. He doesn't take a lot of shots, and Markelle is going to take some shots from people, but he's also going to put the ball in spots where Paolo can score a little bit more, where Franz could score a little bit more, as long as he's a little bit of a threat from three. But again, for the people who are concerned about spacing, it's just like, it's not like Anthony Black is scaring anybody from three and hitting threes either. So, there's going to be an adjustment. Obviously, there's always an adjustment when you add new pieces to the puzzle. But I don't anticipate there being any gap. Like Franz Wagner's been on a couple podcasts, and he said, look, Wendell Carter really helps our defense, like really makes our defense better. All these guys just absolutely love Markelle. Like, they love playing with him. They love his passing ability. And so, there will be some adjustments, and there are some concerns because the offense really struggled in those first 5 games, but there's no reason to think that there's going to be that much disruption to what the Magic are doing, especially since they worked their rotation out where the bench group's been the same bench group regardless of if Wendell and Markelle were playing.
Sometimes when it comes to teams and building in the NBA, a lot of times it like just really comes down to luck. And like I talked about this, I had somebody on yesterday and we were talking about the Indiana Pacers, and we are kind of going back to like their history, and they really never hit like the lottery ball luck. The years that they were really high, it's like it was like a one person draft, like they were like second behind Ewing and second behind Ralph Sampson in the 80s. And
They haven't
you
had they didn't have a top 10 pick before Ben Mathurin last year since like the 80s, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and then they kind of lucked into like they trade Paul George and they get Oladipo and Sabonis, and then Sabonis is ultimately the piece that gets them Halliburton. And kind of similar with the Magic here. Now the Magic did hit the lottery luck like a few times in their history, but it seems like when you guys hit that luck, it's like Shaq, but then Shaq's only there for a little bit, and then Penny gets injured, and then you get the Dwight Howard thing, then that kind of like fizzles out, and then you're kind of bubbling around like kind of just like your lottery luck in like the 2000s was like you're just kind of one behind, or like you're in the top 5 but you're like 4 and get Aaron Gordon, or you're just kind of like uh middling around there. But
Yeah.
the thing that's really been impressive with you guys, and it's kind of a stealth thing that I don't know a lot of people have really talked about, is there have been 2 trades that the Magic have made that have really kind of like helped shaped and mold this team. And I think as the season goes on, if this Orlando team's a team that's like a 4th or a 5th seed or whatever they might be, it's a thing that we're going to be talking about a lot more. Is you basically got Markelle Fultz for like nothing. Like I think he gave up like Jonathan Simmons in that trade, and then
Yeah.
and then the Vucevic trade, which wasn't that the pick that got Franz?
Yep.
Yeah, and then even more luck in that, the Golden State has that pick right before Orlando, and imagine Franz on this Golden State team with Curry.
I remember sitting there on draft night, and we were all thrilled to get Jalen Suggs because we thought Jalen Suggs was one of the top 4 guys in that draft. And look, Scotty Barnes has been very, very good. Don't get me wrong. I got in trouble with Raptors fans about that, but Suggs has been very, very good. Has been very, very good too. It took him a little while with the injuries and stuff, but I remember sitting there on draft night like I was convinced there is no way Golden State doesn't take Franz Wagner, because at the time the rap on him was like, he's going to be a great supporting player. He's a solid defender, like kind of the jack of all trade, master of none, like criticism. And it just felt like that's a mature guy that's going to jump into Golden State, help them win a championship immediately. Like he just felt ready made for the Warriors. And we're all like, and honestly, like I remember I was watching with someone, and I was like, the Magic are going to end up with Suggs and Kuminga. And that's like two cracks at a potential superstar, because we all thought Suggs was going to be it. And Kuminga, we probably had like 5 or 6 on that board. And we were like this, that's a potential star player right there. And he's shown flashes of that, but in Golden State, he's been asked to play a role and hasn't had to, develop that attitude. And so you just never know. So Franz being what he is has been a real dramatic surprise. And you're right. There is a little bit of luck involved in it. But honestly, like kind of going back to the Pacers example, it's just about knowing when to pull the plug. One of the reasons why I think the Magic's rebuild after Dwight Howard just failed so miserably is they waited to trade Dwight Howard at the lowest possible value they could trade him at. He made it clear he wanted to be traded. There was that early termination option. The best deal that they would have gotten for Dwight Howard was the first deal. I think it was Gerald Wallace, a first-round pick, and Brook Lopez from New Jersey, Brooklyn for Dwight. And that would have helped them clear the decks a little bit. I think Brook Lopez was going to be a free agent. So you have someone that can score a little bit. He wasn't quite what he is now. But you have someone who could score a little bit. Gerald Wallace was a free agent. You get the first-round pick that would have come to Orlando, eventually became Damian Lillard. New Jersey ended up sending that out to Portland. I forget who they got in that trade. It might have just been a cap clearing trade, but they traded that first round pick, and that's not to say that they would have been that pick, or Brooklyn, New Jersey would have been a lot better with Dwight Howard, obviously. But that's kind of what happened. Instead, Orlando ends up with Nikola Vucevic, who was a second-year player nobody really knew about, a couple of kind of low-value first-round picks. They backed themselves into an extreme corner and started off that rebuild really bad. I remember, like, in those early days of that rebuild, people asked me, like, why are the Boston Celtics, who made their trade around the same time the Magic did, in the conference finals and playing for championships before Orlando even is sniffing the playoffs? And I tell them, like, look, you can't compare rebuilds. It's always a mistake to do that. But what they started with was so much better than what Orlando started with. When they traded Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, they traded them early, and they traded them to a desperate Brooklyn team that wanted to make a splash. And so they got 3 pick swaps in that deal. And one of those pick swaps ended up getting them Jason Tatum, or they had these like this buku of draft capital. They ended up trading with Philadelphia, getting some pick swaps out of that. They ended up swapping with them to get Jaylen Brown. Like, their whole base was built off that initial trade. And like, to your point about Indiana, with Paul George, the Paul George Indiana thing was going to break up. Like, everyone knew he wanted to leave for Los Angeles. They dealt him to Oklahoma City early. They traded early instead of waiting too long. And that's what happened with the Magic and Nikola Vucevic. They traded him before anyone even realized he was on the market. And so they got 2 high-quality first-round picks from the Bulls, plus Wendell Carter, who's now a key player for them as well. And, it was on Chicago at that point to make those picks valueless. And Chicago, dealt with some COVID issues, honestly, that season, fell out of the playoff picture. We're in the top, we're in the bottom 10 of the league, and ended up giving that draft pick away twice to the Magic because they couldn't get themselves together. And so it really is about that foundational trade. When you're rebuilding, you need some lottery luck. Magic got some lottery luck, no doubt about that. They're in the position they're in because Paolo is that good of a player. But you got to be proactive, I think, at those situations. I think that's the ultimate lesson for rebuilding teams, is when it's clear a rebuild is on the horizon, you're for the most part better off trading early than certainly trading late. If you're going to trade late, you better be able to get all in and all the way in and be good at that. Like Toronto's going through it now. Chicago's going through it now. They need to trade, for both of those teams, it's probably too late. there's a lot of rumblings about Atlanta being a team that could make a lot of moves at the trade deadline this year. It's because Atlanta is probably in a position to trade early and jumpstart a rebuild if this group isn't working.
I know we're talking about the Orlando Magic here, but the Golden State Warriors, I think they really we just talked about it. They took Kuminga over Franz, and then even the year before that, that was when they took Wiseman at number 2. And I just think it's really kind of weird with Golden State, where they built like the big three of that team were Steph Curry, who played 3 years at college, Draymond Green, who played like 4 years at college, Klay Thompson, who played 2 years at college. And I think all those guys came into the league with a little bit more professionalism because of that, and like a little bit more like developed. And I just think it's so odd too when they're trying to do this like dueling eras thing, that they had a chance to draft Franz. But even in that Wiseman draft, I did this kind of like throwback where I went back and read like a bunch of the articles of that 2020 draft. It would have been kind of like a little bit of like a whoa, oh my god, I can't believe that. But they could have, it would not have been crazy if you read how people were looking at the players that 2020 draft. Like people were kind of down on Edwards, no one was really high on anybody. They could have taken Tyrese Halliburton there, who is also similar to Franz, a multiple year college player at number 2. And like if Golden State could have Franz and Halliburton right now, oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
I mean, there's always the woulda, coulda, shouldas with the draft. Like you don't know. And like it's easy to look at Wiseman now and be like, like he's nothing. Like unfortunately, like he just, couldn't figure it out. He obviously did get a full season at Memphis because of the eligibility issues, which really was unfortunate. But, if you also think back about it, like I always say, like you have to look at it with the information you had at the time. Like Golden State felt like they had a culture that could teach these young kids. Like you're going to come in, you're playing with Draymond Green, with Steph Curry, with Klay Thompson. You got to know your place. You got to be about winning a championship. And that's what this group is about. And they felt like that culture was strong enough to teach some of these young players and have them kind of graduate up the ladder. Obviously Wiseman had injury issues, which, slows everything down. Like you can't always predict them. Sometimes you can, but you can't always predict them. It's random. I would also argue the COVID year was particularly very tough on a lot of those rookies, especially. The Magic were fortunate that they got a really strong rookie in Cole Anthony who, was able to jump in and kind of figure things out pretty quickly. But I wouldn't be surprised if, that you look down that list of the 2020 draft, especially, there are a lot of guys, that there are a lot more misses than usual, or a lot of guys who found themselves out of the league pretty quickly because that COVID year was very tough on a lot of rookies. Not just because the draft happened so much later, but also because, your ability to practice and to train was just so different and prepare for a season was just so different than anything else. But when you look back at what Golden State needed, like everyone said, they need a center. They need a center. Like that's the one thing that they haven't been able to figure out. They're, since Bogut retired, Festus Ezeli was, solid for them. They just need a rim protecting center who can catch lobs, run pick and roll, and that feels like something that Wiseman could have done. So I don't really fault Golden State for that pick. The problem was they went all in on this kind of 2-track path. And they needed to because obviously their guys cost a lot of money under the cap, but they went down this 2-track path, and unfortunately they kind of struck out on all the young guys. At the end of the day, Kuminga is still young and still figuring things out. He probably wasn't best suited to play a role. He needed the ball in his hands to make mistakes. Wiseman dealt with injuries. Jordan Poole was their huge success story. He was a second round, late first round pick. And then probably got a little bit big in the head, didn't completely buy into their culture, and that was a problem. Andrew Wiggins did great with that second chance, really established his role on that team. But, we know from his time in Minnesota that he isn't going to be your number one guy. He's going to be the guy to take over for you. So now he's just a very highly paid role player. And so that's kind of, as the Warriors are now starting to age, and I think we're clearly seeing that age show a little bit now, they don't have that clear vision of what their future is going to be.
Yeah, probably that pick wouldn't have been Halliburton. It would have been like LaMelo. And I think
it would have been hard to see them go for a guard because they got Steph. Like,
yeah.
I remember like the knock on Halliburton, like, Magic fans have been talking a lot about it too, because the Magic, I think, missed Halliburton by like 3 picks. a little that year. I think they were they drafted Cole Anthony at 16. Halliburton I think went 11 or 12.
If you read the mocks, people were having I went to Iowa State, so like
Yeah,
I was very invested in it.
yeah,
People had Halliburton from like 5 to like 8 on like on
yeah,
the draft board. So like him
yeah.
falling
And from
like
what I
probably
understand,
the
the Magic did try and trade up for him from what I've
yeah.
heard and understand. But everyone's going to say that now. But like I remember the knock on Halliburton because I really liked him in that draft process too. Was okay. Can his jumper develop? Like he was not a great 3-point shooter. He's got a little bit of a weird form, and the NBA is still very weird about that. About how your shot has to look like a good shot, unless you're a great shooter with a weird form. They're going to criticize. They're going to criticize that, or people are going to criticize that. And there was definitely a lot of concern of, okay, does this guy, can this guy get a shot off in the NBA? Like that's, can he be an effective shooter? And especially with guards, don't tell the Magic this, but with guards, shooting's kind of important.
Yeah, I think to tie a bow on this kind of the Warriors thing there, I think if they would have drafted LaMelo, Draymond probably would have ended up punching him in the face too.
Yeah, but
So
he would have needed it. Like I like unlike a Jordan Poole, I think a LaMelo I think gets it. Like from what I can tell, and like I don't think we need to rehash this, but like the kids, LaMelo and Lonzo especially, really mature kids, like really serious about basketball, and it was their dad,
he's
doing
the one that doesn't get it.
doing like the showmanship stuff, and like God love him for being all about his kids and being so invested in his kids' future, and you love the hustle, but those like LaMelo and Lonzo, and I know Lonzo's dealing with the injuries. They've turned themselves into really solid NBA players, and I think the hype didn't help them, especially Lonzo, because he struggled so much and carved out a really solid role. He was a great playmaker, great defender, and obviously injuries now. Who knows if he'll play again? But it they've turned into really good players nonetheless. And they get it. Like I think they get it at the end of the day.
Okay, well that's good. I might be buying some Hornet stock then.
I
I
mean,
know you.
LaMelo's out right now. LaMelo, I think, is still out with the ankle injury. So don't buy too much Hornet stock.
Yeah, maybe when he comes back, we'll
Yeah.
put a few wagers on some of their games. Um, you mentioned this on like one of your podcasts, and I kind of want to like end with this here because this is the NBA. As much as I'd like to see a lot of these Magic players like stay together, it's the NBA. Players get moved. People love to see love to talk about trades, love to talk about free agency. I think you said you're going to do something later this week on your podcast talking about either like potential like trade candidates or maybe type of players that like the team wants to trade for or should trade for. What do you think that like if the Magic are either going to start shopping some of their own players or trying to shop for a player, what are they going to be looking for?
Shooting. Like they need shooting. And I think the team knows. I think the management knows it. I think the coaches know it. I don't think the players know how much they're going to need shooting when they get to the playoffs. They need shooting, just desperately need shooting. They like I said, they're last in the league in 3-point field goal attempts per game. I think they're 24th or 25th in the league, 20 maybe worse than that in 3-point field goal percentage. They need shooting from their guard position specifically. And there are definitely a few targets out there that look to be available on the trade market. It's just going to be a question of how aggressive are the Magic going to be about being good in this year's playoffs, and being, how aggressive are they going to be about this year's playoffs, or is this season still about future seasons? I've told people throughout the course of this offseason and now even when the Magic are sitting in second in the East, I was like, this season is still not really about this season. Like this season is about figuring out what does this team need to do to get to the next level, to get to being a contender in the East or being a solid playoff team year in and year out for the moment. And frankly, like what this team needs more than anything else is get into a playoff series, maybe get your butt kicked. Like even if you're playing a Cleveland or New York in a 4-5 series, get your butt kicked a little bit. Really figure out what are the weaknesses teams are going to pick apart with this team. Like they don't know yet. And then would assess that playoff series and say, okay, what things can we fix internally and what things do we need to go out and fix externally? So like I remember Dwight Howard's first playoff series. He got his butt kicked by the Detroit Pistons. He averaged like 14 points, like 13 rebounds, 12 rebounds per game, something like that. Came back the next year, was putting up 2020s. Like your first playoff series is always going to be a little bit of a struggle. And so I do anticipate the Magic are going to have a rough time in the playoffs, no matter where they're seated. There could be like Sacramento last year where, yeah, they play a really experienced Warriors team very, very tough, but they're gonna get a lot of their flaws exposed, and they need to get those flaws exposed. And I expect Paolo to have some struggles, and I expect Franz to have some struggles in that first playoff series. And so really it's about understanding what those weaknesses are and how to fix them. I don't anticipate the Magic being super active at the deadline this year because I think they want to give this group that chance. Markelle Fultz is going to be a free agent next summer. I think he has earned the right to prove himself and prove whether he can be this team's point guard. And obviously he's only played 5 games so far this season, so the Magic don't have that information. And it's just like another point that I've kept making is like, I love Wendell Carter. I think he's an excellent defender. I think when you get in the playoffs, though, you need a true rim protector, someone who can play above the basket and block some shots and make plays above the rim. That's not Wendell Carter's game, but he has earned the right to prove us in the playoffs. What can you do? You're going up against Jared Allen. You're going up against Brook Lopez. You're going up against Kristaps Porzingis or Al Horford. What can you do? Show us. And that's where the Magic are at right now with a lot of guys on this team. They obviously can't keep bringing everyone back, but they can keep positioning themselves well to make trades down the line. I think they're going to be very big players on the trade market starting in February, but certainly moving into the offseason and moving forward, at least until Franz and Paolo have to sign their new contracts.
Yeah, I like that answer. You need to like play, get your lumps, get your bruises. Maybe Giannis needs to crack a few ribs with his elbows when he drives to the lane so aggressively. Um, it, I was kind of thinking about this when you were saying that, and I was trying to do like a Dwight Howard when he was on the Lakers in the bubble, like he's guarding Jokic and he's giving him like titty twisters or whatever he was doing. Was Dwight Howard kind of like this? I know he had like some like maturity issues like with Orlando, like the face you just made kind of
Yeah.
affirms that. Like, was he kind
Yeah.
of like this kind of like that series with Jokic? He was just kind of dirty and like
He
scummy. Like,
wasn't like that necessarily. Like he used to
yeah,
like look. I am the biggest Dwight Howard defender. Like I think some Magic fans hate me for this, but I am big on protecting Dwight Howard's legacy in Orlando. Like he was a Hall of Fame player in Orlando. He's going to be in the Hall of Fame. Magic fans need to
hmm
celebrate that when it happens. He was not a dirty player by any means. Like now I think because his athleticism's gone, like maybe he had to do that. People criticized him for not being serious or like having kind of like the Kobe face or the Michael Jordan face. He wanted to have fun. And sure, in the locker room, definitely had kind of maybe a sophomoric sense of humor. So what? Like he was in the NBA from 18 years old onward. Like he didn't grow up, that way. But when he was on the floor, he was, having a good time. He was trying to have a good time still, but he took care of his work and took care of his business. He was, one of the best defensive players that I've seen in my lifetime. So, yeah, he probably had to learn some dirty tricks as his athleticism went away and he lost some of that part of his advantage. And, as a veteran, you learn dirty tricks anyway, like especially in the post where there's a lot of grabbing and pushing and shoving. But Dwight was amazing. He did his work. He did the work. Was he a leader necessarily? Maybe not. Did the Magic need to go for leadership elsewhere on their roster? Absolutely. Did they find it? Jameer Nelson was fine, but not that elite player. Dwight always needed that one extra guy on the perimeter, I think, to really elevate that team, and the Magic never really found it. And unfortunately, I think Dwight, personality-wise, did rub people the wrong way. Like on the 08 Olympic team, Dwight was not part of that in group. He was not on the Banana Boat crew. And that, ultimately, I think cost him a lot in Orlando as well as in the rest of his group.
yeah, well said. I think pretty optimistic about your team so far this year. I think you guys are going to have maybe one of those nice little playoff moments. Maybe show some sparks. Phillip, we're out of time. Do you want to tell us where we can find all of your work, and then we'll head out of here?
Yeah, the best place to find my work is over at orlandomagicdaily.com. So that's where you find most of my written work. You can also check out my podcast, Locked On Magic, as well, wherever you download podcasts, as well as on YouTube.